Hi y'all, welcome to Siso Art. Today we're going to be working on this simple winter painting and exploring dry brushing techniques and glazing. It'd be really cool if you join me. The first thing we're going to do is mix up a pale gray with ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and titanium white and lay in our horizon line for the snowbank. Just using a large flat brush here. We're putting the horizon line low on this landscape because I think the interesting part is the trees, and we want to see the fullness of the trees even though they don't have leaves on them. And to me, what was so appealing about the reference photo, which by the way I got from Pixabay, was just so soft and kind of luminous sky and misty and just an ethereal feeling, and that's what I wanted to try to capture. So anyway, the horizon line on this 12-inch by 36-inch canvas, I'm estimating, I mean, you put it where you want, but about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom, and that's a good rule of thirds application. So this is a really good start. It gives us a little bit of a roadmap. Now let's just do the foreground of the snow by adding quite a bit more of the titanium white into the pale gray that we had mixed up. Now my canvas is a little dry, and this is a long stretch, being 3 feet long, so I'm using my ultrafine mist bottle just to add a little bit of moisture to the air. Try not to get too close to the canvas when you spray because you'll make drops, but it just helps to keep things a little bit moister and flowing more easily, and it just takes it just a little bit. As soon as we're done with this foreground, we're going to start on the misty area that is behind the trees. We're going to mix up ultramarine blue, a touch of cad red light, and lots of titanium white. I'm just using this big Daler Rowney brush. It was fairly inexpensive. It's probably about 1.5 inches wide and a little bit of a filbert shape. When you mix up this misty color, make sure that you have a large enough pile that you can hold some in reserve, because we're going to need it later to paint back over the top of the trees once we put those in. And also a little bit of dry brushing. And we don't want to try to match that color. It's hard to do in acrylics because they tend to dry a little bit darker than what you think they will. And it's just hard to match. So make a big enough pile of this misty color that you'll have some in reserve when you need it. There are different ways that you can lay in gradients, and we'll explore some of those in some other videos coming soon. But for this one, I thought the dry brush technique would be appropriate for the nature of the misty feeling that we're trying to capture here. You know, if you're outside and looking through the fog, it's not completely solid and opaque. There are little sections that are a little bit darker and a little bit lighter just because of the objects that are being obscured by the fog. So we want there to be, believe it or not, a little bit of texture in this, and we get that more easily with a dry brush than if we were to just do a very smooth gradient. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Well, I got my water bottle a little too close the last time I sprayed right here, so I'm just smoothing out those water drops. It'll be fine. I apologize because you can't see the reference photo very well, although you can see it taped up there on the top left portion of my easel, but this bluer color goes higher to the right in the background, And I think it's important for the composition because the trees are heavy on the left side of the canvas. So we just kind of want to offset that and make a bit of an angle line over here to the right. So just bring that bluish area up a little bit higher. And now I'm just going to add some plain white to the top of this area now to make it a little bit easier to do the transition to the next color that we're going to apply. I'm still just adding plain old titanium white right here. Just kind of refining the edges of this color, of the bluish color. I'm just going to let this dry a little bit and go wash out my brush. Then I'll play with the foreground some more. So I just want to add a little bit of variety or texture into the ground. So just doing various mixtures of the gray and white, or in variations in the proportions of the gray to the white. Just kind of, I don't know, just adding a little texture. This, you're just gonna have to look at how it looks on your canvas and just kind of work it back and forth, back and forth. Yay, now comes the fun part. We're adding some warm color to this winter scene. It was getting a little dreary with all the gray and blue and purple and all that. So I'm going to use cadmium red light and plenty of titanium white. The cadmium reds are very strong colors, so truly you just needed a smidge. Like take your palette knife and just get the tiniest amount of the cadmium red that you can and mix it into the pile of white slowly, because you can always add more, but it's very difficult to mute it back down. You'd have to add half a tube of white to, knock it back. So just a tiny, tiny bit. Cadmium red light is, to me, has a lot of an orange hue to it, or an orange cast, much more than the other cadmium reds. So it's perfect for this color. If you can only afford to get 2 tubes of paint of red, I would recommend cadmium red light and naphthol crimson, or cadmium red light and quinacridone red. If you can only afford 2, that's what I would use. I'm new to this whole making videos of painting, so I hope y'all don't think I'm talking too much or it's too boring. I'd appreciate some feedback on if you're getting any value out of this. So it'd be awesome if you'd leave me a comment on the video down below. I'm just going to continue putting this, from now on we're going to call this orangey pink, peachy color, and just keep going across. And use your spray bottle if you need to. If you're like me, it's winter here as well, and the heater's been running like crazy, so it's the air is dry. So Mr. Bottle helps a lot. Or if you have a humidifier, you could put that in your painting room. I don't have one, so I'm just using my Mr. bottle. Okay, so let's talk about dry brushing. And it's just what the name implies. You use a dry brush to apply a very thin film of paint to the canvas. And it optically mixes whatever color you're applying on top of the base layer. I think because it's such a thin layer that you're applying that you can kind of see through it. And because the paint is dry, it kind of catches on the surface weave of the canvas. And so the little bits of the color that are underneath that are worked down into the bottom of the weave of the canvas will show through. Anyway, I think it'll work really well for the effect we're going for here and kind of a foggy, misty, textured air, that you can almost touch effect that we're going for here. So just again, have the brush very, very dry or just barely damp. Dip it, just the tip of it, into your pile of paint that you're applying to the canvas, and then even kind of pounce it on a paper towel every once in a while so that you don't have too much paint on the end of the brush. And you just have to play with it. You can go back and forth. It takes a light touch. You don't scrub or push hard. And it takes a while. It is a slow process. But just crank up your tunes, have some good music, and just relax and understand it's going to take a little while, and just go through the process and see how it develops. I want to add some yellow and white up here in this section just to brighten that up. I think it'll look good. Yeah, just a little bit of yellow. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to apply this yellow color in the same way. It's probably getting a little tedious for you to watch this. So I'm going to do this and we'll skip ahead and work on the trees next. So I want to place the center tree off center to the left, just like in the reference photo. And this looks like a good spot. The color I've used to mix up for this tree color is black and red, which will make a brown, and then yellow to lighten that up a little bit, and then the titanium white will gray that color down some more. So it's black and red, yellow, and white. And I'm using a thin flat, I think it's a number 4 brush to put in my basic trunk shape. So the basic tree trunks are in now, and I'm going to use a small liner brush to do the little twigs on the end. I'm using a lighter version of this gray for the twigs on the ends of the branches, so it'll fade in a little more with the misty color. Just keep detailing the trees in the same manner until you have all three done. So this is looking really good now, but we want to push the trees back somewhat with the colors of the mist so that they look like they're enveloped in the mist as well. So for the upper portions where the trees are superimposed over that peach color, we're going to go back to that peach color that you had mixed up before and use dry brush technique to soften those tree branches. And we'll do the same thing with the areas that are in front of the bluish mist. And I should have said that you need to make sure that the tree areas are dry. Otherwise, when you're dry brushing over them, you'll have some unintended consequences. So let's work on this foreground area again a little bit. Just going to add some more grasses and just use that same bristle brush. It's kind of scruffy and just kind of flick up very softly. And we'll have some texture of grass. And we're doing this so that there's something to stop your eye on this side of the painting, and it helps to balance it out a little bit more. And when it's all said and done, we'll do the pleasing numbers of items. So we have the 3 tree clumps, and then we'll have 5 grass clumps. And that just seems to work better when you use odd numbers for your grouping of items that you're looking at in your painting. So we're just going to continue to resolve this foreground area, add bits of white where the snow is piled up and bits of gray to add the texture and shadows, and just keep working it back and forth until it looks right to you. So it's a new day. The lighting is a little different in my painting room. And I think that these tree trunks, the lower portions of the trees, need to be misted over a little bit more. So I'm just dry brushing on some more of that bluish misty color. I'm using this don't know, the label's worn off on it, the writing and such, but I'm pretty sure it was a Winsor & Newton bristle brush. It's been used a lot, so it was a flat. Now it's kind of a fluffy filbert, which is ideal for this technique. Just scrubbing on some thin, dry layer of this kind of misty purpley blue color that we used for this area. Just want to soften all of this and make it look very ethereal. It's been such a brutal winter for most of the country, including us down here in South Louisiana. It took 3 days for this, I don't know, 2 inches of snow that we got to fully melt, which is the longest in my recollection for down here anyway. So people may be tired of winter. I know I certainly was, although it's beautiful today. Sun is shining and fairly warm. But this was a photograph that I saw on Pixabay, which is one of my favorite sites to go to. Just beautiful photography on there from all over the world. And this was just such an appealing photograph to me. I said, oh, I gotta try it. I can picture this format and having someone hang it in their home, you know, with maybe like a dark colored or darker colored wall, that this would stand out, especially once we put the glaze and kind of iridescent it up a little bit. Anyway, it's just soft, and I just thought it was pretty and wanted to try to see if I could recreate it and share it with you so we learn together. I think I want to fade this down a little bit more, so I'm going to use that cadmium red light and white misty color. And again, just doing this dry brush technique. I don't know, there's a lot of people that love the cold weather and winter, so they might be interested in this kind of painting as well. This is good and dry from these previous layers, so I don't have to worry about lifting anything off or unintended mixing, which is good. Well, I think this technique is going to work. Especially when you step back. It's one of the things that I forget to do, is to step back from your painting and, you know, view it from what the average viewing distance is. It does make a difference. I wouldn't call this one really fine art, but I do like the way it looks, and it's been a fun project to work on. I hope some of you have tried something like this. If you have, put it down in the comments. If you get a little too vigorous with your covering up with the misty color, you can go back with your tree color and just punch that back up. It's what I often do in my paintings. It's a lot of back and forth. It's just part of the process. When I looked back at this, I didn't like these patches here. Not as much as I thought I would. So, cover them up. I've mixed up a glaze to tie all these elements together to soften it just a little bit more. And I added a little bit of snow in here and darkened this tree trunk. That'll be the focal point. Just need just a tiny bit of variety. I also put a couple of the sky colors, just a couple little smudges here and there on the snow in the foreground. Now this glaze that I'm going to apply next, I used the Liquitex Satin acrylic glazing medium, probably about a tablespoon and a half worth, in this old paper plate that's been used a few times. Just let the paint dry that's left over in it, and it dries and makes the plate even more waterproof for the next bit of paint that you apply, so it works fine. And I put maybe like the size of a small marble of the transparent mixing white and a little pea-sized dollop of the iridescent and the Grumbacher paints. And I mixed that into the medium well with a palette knife so that I don't have, I mix it with a palette knife so that it makes it a little more uniform in the mixture. I've got this hake brush, and I just barely dampened the end in some clean water, and I'm just going to brush this across and we'll see how it looks. We probably won't really be able to tell until it's dry if it really makes that much of a difference or not. I'm going to lightly mist my canvas. This is a very transparent layer. Between it being transparent mixing white to begin with and the iridescent paint is pretty transparent as well. And then putting in the glazing liquid, so yes, it's very transparent. Might be too much, I don't know, we'll see. This is a 12-inch by 36-inch canvas. I wanted to make sure I mixed up enough so that I didn't have to stop and try to mix up some more. The glazing medium is dry, and although it's hard for you to probably see it because I don't have fancy camera equipment to record this, but it did make a difference. I'm quite happy and pleased how it turned out. I would be so honored if you'd leave me a like or a comment in the section below, and thanks for joining me. Have a good day.